Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with a recording we've all been waiting for, the Brahms Fourth Symphony, with the Pittsburgh Symphony, conducted by Manfred Honeck. Now, Honeck has been having his issues lately, as you know. There was his kind of mannered and futzed around with performance of Tchaikovsky's Fourth. Then there was his really narcissistic, navel-gazing version of the Ninth. Yes, it was most unfortunate. In fact, it prompted an entire editorial about, from me anyway, about conductors behaving badly and about what happens to them when they become these self-inflated, micromanaging, navel-gazing. I can't even begin to express it. It's so irritating. So I am delighted to report, as some of you have already pointed out, some of you have heard this disc already, that this is terrific. It's just a terrific Brahms Fourth. It doesn't do anything stupid. It doesn't do anything ridiculous, but it has its individual qualities that seem to do what the music wants it to do, which is always where we want those individual qualities to be. And we'll talk about a few of them in a moment. One thing I do have to say is that this is another one of those productions where Honeck writes the liner notes, and they're very intelligent notes. I mean, assuming he actually did write them himself, which you never really know because, these people have staffs and people who, they do all their work for them. But on the off chance that he actually wrote this thing himself, they're very, very good notes as they describe the symphony. Then he starts with all the stuff about how wonderful his performance is. He doesn't say that, but he's kind of suggesting, here I do this, and at bar 75 I do that, and oh, I wish, Maestro Honeck, that you would just shut up and play the music and let the performance speak for itself. Nobody needs this. It's a great performance. It doesn't need a verbal explanation. And frankly, the fact that it has one, I think, really sort of it diminishes the achievement, because the achievement is that all of these things that you do, Maestro Honeck, speak so eloquently and directly when we hear them. You don't need to tell us. You don't need to say that you're particularly careful to achieve a beautiful legato throughout the second movement. We hear the beautiful legato. It is beautiful. It is legato. It's marvelous. So just cool it, would you? I know that there are people who are going to love that stuff. I know there are people who love to know what the story is behind the music and how it's done and what they're doing, and they want it all explained. But the reality is, what Brahms wanted was a piece of music that speaks for itself as music. And you are not helping to do that, Maestro Honeck. So stop it, please. Okay, he's never going to listen to me, I know. But really, there's something so off-putting for me, for somebody who loves the music, who wants people to listen deeply, to consider what they're hearing, and not have to be spoon-fed and told, because it just, see, I'm going on again. I can't stop. It just promotes the notion that normal listeners do not have the wherewithal to understand and experience the expressive meaning of a piece of abstract music unless they take a course or have some sort of something going on. And that drives me crazy. That drives me crazy. Because what brought all of us to this music was just the music. It was not the fact that in bar 67 you can hear the second bassoon part. That was not the thing that did it. Anyway, let's talk about the performance, shall we? The first movement is a pretty sort of normal, within the parameters performance of the first movement. The opening is exquisitely gentle, incredibly beautiful, but the tempo is nicely flowing so that it doesn't sound dull and it doesn't sound, lacking in textural density, but it's beautifully sung. It really is. There are so many lovely tunes in this movement anyway, and it's really a very, very attractive performance. But it does not get excitable until the very end, which is of course when it should be. The coda is one of Brahms's most exciting and vicious and tragic musical utterances, and it's just very well done. It's very well shaped and it's beautiful. Now that second movement, as Mr. Maestro, whatever he's called, as Honeck tells us, is extremely legato. That tune. Da, 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 da. Wow, this is ya, da, 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 da. And it's certainly a way to do it. You can do it legitimately. But the key, I think, is not the legato. The key is that although you're playing everything very legato, it is rather swift comparatively. Again, this is all comparative compared to the other great performances that are out there. And it's the speed, the swiftness that keeps the whole thing from turning into a turgid mass of somnolescent legatoosity. Otherwise, it would be really sleepy. But it isn't. It isn't because he really keeps it moving, and because the big climax, which is actually a transition between the first subject and the second subject of a sonata movement. That dum bum 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 bum, and the timpani finally come in and all that. They nail it. It's very, very exciting and really violent. It has exactly, I think, the disruptive character that the music needs at that point. It's a very smart interpretation. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. Honeck is a very, very smart guy. The only issue is whether he's so in love with his own smartness that it ruins the music. Here it doesn't. It's really, really good. Now, the scherzo is, again, on the quick side, and I think this is possibly interpretively, the most interesting part of the whole symphony, as far as Honeck's conception goes, because usually this movement is kind of heavy. It's heavy. It sounds sort of like Jupiter from the planets. It has a sort of ho, ho, ho quality. It's marked allegro giocoso. But Honeck takes a much lighter approach to it. It's not lacking in impact or anything like that, but it's fleet, and the textures and are wonderfully transparent all the way through. And the triangle part is not a concerto solo. The triangle is actually very well integrated into the orchestral texture. You don't hear it clanging along up front the way you so often do in many other performances. It really is an individual conception of the piece. And I think it works wonderfully because it really sounds more scherzo-like than it usually does. Usually it sounds sort of very meaty and almost, it is a sonata or a movement, but it sounds almost like a happy version of the first movement, in the sense that it's really exhaustingly intense. But Honeck wants to save something for the finale, which is always a smart thing to do. And the finale is also on the quick side, save for the slow variations in the middle, which feature an absolutely exquisite flute solo, by the way. We want to add, he actually tells us who the flute player is. Let me give a shout out to the flute player. Wait a minute, because she really deserves it. She's absolutely marvelous. I mean, he praises her, and he is right to. Where is this? Let's see here. Where is the flute solo? Here's the flutist. There she is, Lorna McGee. Fabulous work from Lorna McGee. She is a splendid artist and plays as gorgeous a flute solo as you will ever hear in this concluding Passacaglia. But what's really nice about it, like I said, is the flowingness of the whole thing. And again, the opening phrasing of that theme, some people really punch it out, blah, 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 blah. Not here. It's very smooth. Everything is bound together. It's very legato, very sustained. But once the actual movement gets going, it's got all kinds of contrast and color, and the closing pages are done just about perfectly. There's a little bit of acceleration when the trombones roar out the tune, and then at the very, very end, Honeck does not hang on to that last chord, as some are wont to do, to try and, make it sound even more final. No, this is abrupt and it's vigorous, and really it makes the symphony sound more youthful than it often does. Even though it was a work, of course, of Brahms's old age, the third is the elegiac symphony among the four. Whereas this one has just loads of energy. And I think the final impression you come away with is a performance that has just tremendous vigor. And I like that very, very much. The orchestral playing is gorgeous. I've already mentioned, the strings are exquisite. The horns are, of course, fabulous. The winds, the flute solo. Everybody is on top of their game for this performance. So good for you, Maestro Honeck and Pittsburgh. Of course, Pittsburgh has done these symphonies, and recently, exquisitely well. I mentioned this in my talk of Brahms symphonies, the Janowski-Brahms cycle on pentatone, which is currently missing numbers 2 and 3, because 2 and 3 is out of print, but 1 and 4 are around, which is insane. But that's a fabulous, fabulous Brahms cycle with amazing playing from the Pittsburgh Symphony. They were always great in this music. Going way back, they were great in this music. And so it's really marvelous to know that they have sustained the quality that we expect of them and turned in a performance that is special in its interpretive slant on the work and special in a good way, not demented. Now, there is a coupling here. The coupling is Macmillan's Larghetto for orchestra. And I have to say, I'm not a big fan of Macmillan. You guys know how I feel about this kind of stuff. He's a talented composer. He's written a lot of music, lots of music. He's, had his sort of 15 minutes of fame back when, Evelyn Glennie was playing his percussion thing on RCA. And then he did a bunch of other stuff. He tends to write things that are influenced by older music, by Gregorian chant, by Catholic rite, stuff that I'm not particularly sympathetic to. I'm not, and that's me. Other people will be. So, it's not his fault. He's doing what he feels is correct and what is right for him, and I don't for a moment doubt his sincerity. He's a serious composer with real talent. The Larghetto for orchestra, which is attached here, is 14 minutes and 56 seconds of a work that was arranged. It's an arrangement or adaptation of a choral work, a miserere, and you can tell immediately that it was a choral work. You can hear the vocal inspiration behind the piece. There are Gregorian chant-like melodies and rhythmic patterns with repeated notes in the various, wind instruments particularly, towards the middle of the piece. You know that they're saying something. And for that reason, the piece communicates immediately. It's quite tonal. It's almost really harmonically, almost conservative. It's a very easy listen. Vaughan Williams' Tallis Fantasia, it's not by any stretch of the imagination. I think that it is not all that memorable thematically. I suspect that hearing it with the actual words in its choral form would be more rewarding, because you could relate the underlying harmonic sequences to the actual text. Whereas as an abstract work, you know that they're saying something, but you kind of would like to know what it is, because all by itself, it seems not as compelling as perhaps it might be. I'm not sure. You have to give it time. I've listened to it a few times already, and all I can say is that it's not growing on me the way something, sort of does once you get into it. But that's purely my personal view of the piece. It's certainly attractive. It's an enterprising coupling. It was a Pittsburgh Symphony commission. I think it's totally admirable that they recorded it and preserved it. And they've done a lot of things like that as couplings to these discs, which I think is really important. It's the right thing to do. So I have no issue with it being there. You may like it more than I did. It's the Brahms that really, of course, is the feature event. And a feature event, it definitely turns out to be. Yes. So keep on listening, folks. Thanks for joining me. Go get your Brahms and take care.